more Israelis coming out to protest against the current government. And that sound you hear behind me are hundreds of Israelis who are welcoming those 4 female Israeli soldiers just freed from Hamas captivity.
How much is too much, sir? At what point is it time to end this war?
I'm Melissa Bell in Paris, and this is CNN.
A very warm welcome to the show, everyone. I'm Soares. Tonight, combative and contentious Pam Bondi's testimony at the House Oversight hearing erupts into a shouting match with the U.S. Attorney General, calling one top Democrat a washed-up loser lawyer. We'll have more on that. Then a mass shooting shocks Canada, leaving a remote mountain town mourning the deaths of at least 9 people. Plus, high-stakes diplomacy. U.S. President Donald Trump welcomes Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to the White House for the 7th time in less than 13 months. We'll go live to Washington and to Jerusalem. A busy hour. We'll have that and much more just ahead. It is a busy hour, but we do begin with accusations of a massive cover-up at the U.S. Justice Department over the international sex trafficking operation that's really at the heart of the Epstein files. We've been following a firing hearing on Capitol Hill today for several hours. Questions devolved into shouting matches at times as lawmakers grilled Attorney General Pam Bondi about the heavily redacted files. Democrat Jamie Raskin told Bondi, quote, abandoning victims and coddling perpetrators is what you do best. Have a listen.
You redacted the names of abusers, enablers, accomplices, and co-conspirators, apparently to spare them embarrassment and disgrace, which is the exact opposite of what the law ordered you to do. You're running a massive Epstein cover-up right out of the Department of Justice.
Well, Bondi would not directly answer when asked whether 1,000 people were assigned to scrub President Donald Trump's name from the files. And she bristled when asked if she agreed with the FBI director that there's, quote, no credible information that Jeffrey Epstein trafficked girls to anyone else. Have a listen.
My position is any victim who comes forward, of course, we would love to hear from them. 1-800-CALL-FBI. Did you ask Merrick Garland that the last 4 years? Did you talk about Epstein?
I am reclaiming my time. I'm glad you're asking about Merrick Garland.
You don't get to reclaim
because
time
this
when
is
you
bigger
don't,
than
when
Watergate.
When I don't answer a question
this
the way you
goes
want.
over 4 administrations. You don't have to go back to Biden. Let's go back to Obama. Let's go back to George Bush. This cover-up spans decades, and you are responsible for this portion of it.
Thomas Massey there. Well, another powerful moment involved survivors of Epstein's crimes. You see them standing there attending today's hearing.
To the survivors in the room, if you are willing, please stand. And if you are willing, please raise your hands if you have still not been able to meet with this Department of Justice. Please know for the record that every single survivor has raised their hand.
That moment clearly incredibly moving, and the calls for justice are only growing louder now that some lawmakers have begun reviewing the unredacted files. One of them, Republican Nancy Mace, says she has lost all faith in the Justice Department. She says that she has a name that she wants to testify before Congress using subpoena power if necessary. She says she's prepared to die on this hill. Those were her words, fighting for justice, even if it costs her politically. Another lawmaker, Democrat Ro Khanna, says 70 to 80% of the files are still redacted. He accused the DOJ of hiding the names of 6 powerful, wealthy men for no apparent reason. Also his words. He says the DOJ has fixed its mistake, and yesterday Khanna read those names on the House floor. Plenty for us to talk about this hour. I'm joined now by senior U.S. Justice correspondent Evan Perez and attorney and legal affairs commentator Ariva Martin. Thank you for being here with us. Evan, let me start with you first of all. We played little clips there, but you know, for hours these were some heated and combative exchanges, which clearly, as we play their focus primarily on the Epstein files, and some of the survivors, of course, were in that hearing too. You were inside. I saw from the messages we were putting out on our social media. Give us a sense of what stood out to you.
Well, the fact that the Attorney General came with, you could see she, with these papers that she has on the table next to her, she came prepared with these one-liner zingers. These are insults against members of Congress who she knew were going to ask very tough questions of her. It's a strategy she used very effectively in the previous hearings, and where clearly where she doesn't want to answer a question or where she believes the answer that she has is not going to be very good for her. She relies on these one-liners to insult members of Congress, to call into question something from their own districts as a way to divert attention. And today, Jamie Raskin and a couple others called her on it. They tried to cut her off, and you could see some of that exchange going back and forth. There was one Republican, that was Representative Massey, who you saw there going back and forth with the Attorney General. And one of the things that he pointed out was that there were all of these pages, he put it into the record, these dozens and dozens of pages of FBI records. These were so-called 302s, right? These are interviews, intake interviews of people providing evidence that the FBI, that the Justice Department has redacted completely, entire black pages. And under the law that was passed last in November, they were not supposed to be that way. And so that's one of the things that he brought up. I should note one quick thing here, that the Attorney General kept trying to say, why didn't you ask these questions of Merrick Garland? Well, we should remind everyone that the reason why this Epstein thing is a problem for the administration is that Bondi is the one that opened this entire issue a year ago, when she went on Fox News, claimed that she had a Epstein clients list on her desk, and then later on said she didn't, right? And so that's why this issue won't go away for her. She created this problem, and now she can't run away from it.
And Ariva, let me bring you in and really pick up with what Evan was saying, because we heard lawmakers speak at length about victims' names being left unredacted, including a Republican, as Evan was saying, Thomas Massey, who really didn't hold back. But what we heard were many lawmakers painting the DOJ as incompetent or sloppy or even worse, corrupt. On the reductions front, Bondi said, I'm going to quote her here, she said that the error rate is, quote, very low. Just your thoughts on that. And do you feel that she gave any meaningful answers on this? I don't think we can hear you. Give me a second. For some reason, Ariva, we cannot hear you. Are you? I'm going to ask. No? Okay, we're going to check with Ariva, see maybe she's muted. But Evan, let me ask you then about the redactions, because then we'll get Ariva back. You said, and we know that Congress has been allowed to review these unredacted, right, files, but it has been in a limited capacity. They were talking about how many computers they have access
like 4
to.
computers, right?
Right, exactly. And hundreds and thousands of files. How did Bondi respond to this criticism? Because she was pushed on this several times.
Yeah, she said she tried to minimize it. She also blamed, she had a number of explanations, including the fact that she said the Justice Department had a very short period of time to carry out the redactions to be able to do this. I should remind everyone that actually the redactions began again, last year, like in March and April. They were spending months doing these redactions. And so the idea that the Justice Department didn't have enough time to comply with the law just really doesn't make any sense. I mean, when they want to comply with the law, they do it. And so in this case, there does seem to be an effort by the department to do the bare minimum, and in some cases, over-redacting. And that's one of the criticisms that you heard repeatedly from members of Congress today.
Yeah, stay with us. I think we fixed Ariva's problem. Ariva, are you still with us? Just really picking up. I'm hoping you heard my answer, but what did you take away, and whether you thought she gave any meaningful answers on the question of the redactions here?
Not at all. I think, like Evan said, that what we saw from this Attorney General was her effort to try to, go viral with these zingers, these constant insults directed at lawmakers, and deflection, refusal to answer simple questions, because I don't think the answers look good for her department. I think her department has made a complete mess of this matter. They haven't complied with the law. They haven't been transparent. They haven't been honest in what they have released to the public. And I think what was so telling about this were those victims that raise their hands to say they have not been able to communicate with this Department of Justice. We see this Department of Justice seeking to expose those individuals that are, quote unquote, enemies of the president, but not doing nearly enough to communicate with victims, to center the victims, or to do anything to give the American people any reassurance that this is a fair and just revelation of documents that they've been required to produce.
And Lariva, there were numerous firing exchanges, but I want to play one with Representative Nadler on the co-conspirators. Have a listen to this.
The answer to my question, how many of Epstein's co-conspirators has she indicted, is 0. You have been the Attorney General for a whole year, and your DOJ fired the lead prosecutor of this case, sat on evidence this entire time, and claimed falsely last July that there were no more leads. It took an act of Congress for you to finally release part of the Epstein files, and when you did, you included personal information about the victims while protecting the names of abusers.
And this speaks to the point you were making, Lariva, the lack of transparency and trust here when it comes to DOJ. Just explain to our international audience why there haven't been more charges against more conspirators, because we're seeing the justice system going at a different pace in the United States compared to what we're seeing in the UK.
Well, the only explanation is that the Justice Department has decided that they want to protect these individuals, that these are rich and powerful individuals who have been identified as co-conspirators, people who've been identified as engaging in the heinous conduct that Jeffrey Epstein was charged with. And there is no legal justification for not charging them other than the president has made it clear that he has a retribution list. And this Department of Justice is spending all of its time like trying to indict 6 Democratic Congress folks who made statements to the military about not following illegal directives from this White House. That's how this Justice Department is spending this time rather than going after these co-conspirators. And there is no justification that is acceptable to the American people and definitely not to these victims.
Yeah, and as you're talking, Lariva, we're seeing, of course, the Attorney General on Capitol Hill still being pressed on all these questions. Of course, we'll keep across it. Lariva Martin and Evan Perez, thank you to you both. We'll stay across the story, of course, throughout the hour. And we're going to continue to stay in the United States because for the 7th time in nearly 13 months, US President Donald Trump is hosting the Israeli Prime Minister at the White House. CNN captured this video of Benjamin Netanyahu entering privately on the South Lawn earlier, and he left just a short time ago after meeting, really that lasting a little more than an hour. I'm hoping we have the video. If not, we'll come back to it. At the top of today's agenda, ongoing tensions with Iran. Israeli sources say Mr. Netanyahu is pressing the US president to widen US talks with Iran to include limits on missile arsenal. And this comes as Trump tells Axios he might deploy a second naval strike group to the Middle East. And here you can see just how much military force has been built up near Iran. Mr. Trump expects a second round of negotiations to take place sometime, next week. Joining us for tonight's coverage, Kevin Liptak at the White House, Jeremy Diamond in Jerusalem. So, Kevin, a lengthy meeting. Give us a sense of how it's gone.
Yeah, and we've heard now from President Trump, who wrote about it on Truth Social. He's describing a relatively inconclusive session with Netanyahu, but he is also describing a relatively pointed message that he offered to the Prime Minister when it comes to this question of Iran and when it comes to this question of diplomacy. He said it was a very good meeting. He says that the tremendous relationship between our two countries continues. There was nothing definitive reached other than I insisted that negotiations with Iran continue to see whether or not a deal can be consummated. If it can, I let the Prime Minister know that that will be a preference. If it cannot, we will just have to see what the outcome will be. And I think his word insisted there is pretty significant. You know, it was pretty evident that Netanyahu was coming to the White House to voice some skepticism that this diplomacy was going to yield anything productive. And, you know, this meeting was originally meant to be next week. Netanyahu asked for it to be moved up today, which I think gives you a sense of the urgency with which he was arriving here in Washington to discuss this with the president. You know, this was Netanyahu's, I think, 6th visit to the United States since President Trump took office. Most of those meetings have taken place in front of cameras. This one occurred entirely behind the scenes. In my experience, the presidents typically do that when there's a disagreement at hand. They don't necessarily want that spilling into public view, and I think that's sort of what is occurring here. There is a deep skepticism in the Israeli government that the president's diplomacy here is going to be productive. I think at the very least, Netanyahu wanted to tell the president and encourage the president to expand these talks beyond just Iran's nuclear program. You know, that had been a red line for Iran. Netanyahu wants to see these talks encompass things like the ballistic missiles, Iran's support for proxies in the region. It doesn't seem evident from the president's readout here that he was successful in stymieing these talks at all. But clearly the president making evident here that he will continue this diplomatic path.
Yeah, let me go to Jeremy, because Jeremy, I'm just looking at President Trump's message on Truth Social. He said there was nothing definitive reached other than I insisted that negotiations with Iran continue to see whether or not a deal can be consummated. And I imagine for the US president, reaching a deal is the priority here. What is the priority then? I mean, this is the 7th meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu. What is the priority for, of course, Prime Minister Netanyahu? We have a sense of the readout, because I remember he said Iran was first and foremost the issue on the agenda.
Well, I'll pick up where Kevin left off, which is with this idea that while the prime minister was clearly not successful in getting Trump to abandon this diplomatic effort with Iran, which again is not clear entirely that that was the prime minister's aim here, we don't yet know whether he was successful or not in convincing President Trump to expand the scope of those negotiations to return to what U.S. officials initially planned to discuss with Iran, which was not only the nuclear file, but also the issue of Iran's ballistic missile program and its support for regional proxies such as Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis as well in the region. And we don't yet know, there was nothing in President Trump's Truth Social post there to indicate whether or not that was discussed, whether or not the Israeli prime minister was successful in that regard in terms of pushing President Trump to include those issues as well. We know in the past, as recently as a few days ago, President Trump indicated that he would perhaps consider a deal that only focused on the nuclear issue if it was a good deal. And so we don't yet know whether or not President Trump intends to revive those issues as key topics in these negotiations. We also understand from Israeli sources that Prime Minister Netanyahu was intending to present new Israeli intelligence to President Trump regarding the ways in which Israel believes Iran is trying to reconstitute its ballistic missile program in ways that would threaten not only Israel but also U.S. military bases in the region, and of course to also discuss military options with the president. The Israeli prime minister was indeed accompanied by his military secretary, who he has now been nominated to be the next head of Israel's intelligence service. And so obviously that close intelligence and defense partnership is still on display, and that military option for both President Trump as well as for the Israelis clearly very much remaining on the table, even as President Trump once again recommitting to engaging in this diplomatic effort. Isa?
Hopefully we'll get more of a readout from the Israeli side. Jeremy Diamond and Kevin Liptak, thank you very much to you both. We're going to turn to Canada because Canada is a nation this hour in shock and in mourning after a school shooting in a remote mountain town. At least 9 people were killed and 25 others hurt when someone opened fire at a secondary school and at home in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia, really a picturesque community of only 2,400 people. Police tell CNN that right now they're unable to publicly confirm the identity of the shooter, who was found dead at the school from a self-inflicted injury. Mass school shootings are extraordinarily rare in Canada. The last one on this scale was nearly half a century ago. Tumbler Ridge is at the foothills of the Rocky Mountains in Western Canada, just to give you some perspective of the location. Now, Paula Newton is in Ottawa with more details for you.
There is a report of an active shooter at the Tumbler Ridge Secondary School.
In this small, tight-knit community, shock and disbelief spread as soon as the shelter-in-place order went out Tuesday afternoon. Mobile phone messages warned of an active shooter, describing the suspect as a woman wearing a dress with brown hair. The town's high school was in lockdown, students barricading themselves in classrooms, a local journalist conveying the terror now rippling through the small town.
I talked to a concerned parent who's here waiting. He got a call from his son who is sheltering in place in the gym, and he's just waiting to hear from his other kid and is quite rightly nervous.
Authorities say police arrived at the school within minutes, but already found 6 victims dead. Another died on the way to hospital. At least 25 were injured, and the suspect found dead in the school of a self-inflicted injury. 2 more victims were found dead at a home in the area. Police are saying little about the suspect, still haven't publicly identified them or any possible motive.
I think we will struggle to determine the why, but we're going to try and do our best to determine what transpired that day and what led up to this tragic event.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, visibly shaken and teary-eyed, expressing the profound grief now felt right across the country.
It's obviously a very difficult day for the nation this morning. Parents, grandparents, sisters, brothers in Tumbler Ridge will wake up without someone they love. The nation mourns with you. Canada stands by you.
Reaction poured in from around the world, including condolences from global leaders, and this from King Charles and Queen Camilla, saying we can only begin to imagine the appalling shadow that has now descended across Tumbler Ridge, and our hearts go out to all those whose lives have been so shattered by this senseless act of brutal violence. Authorities are now surging resources to the area, including investigative support. Local leaders describe the community as stricken as Canada enters a full week of official mourning.
And Paula Newton joins me now live from Ottawa. Paula, I know there are lots of questions that we all have at this hour, swirling, of course, about what happened here. But what more do we know, what more are you hearing about the victims here? And any indication as to when the police will reveal more details about the suspect?
So we are expecting a press conference within the hour, and I have to tell you, Issa, that will come as great relief, not just to people across Canada wanting to know how this could happen, but to those in the community itself. I mean, Tumbler Ridge, it's barely 2,500 people. The school was attached to the health clinic practically just across the parking lot, which saved a lot of lives. Police arrived within minutes. So many people in this community connected so intimately to what happened. We do not have information on how everyone is doing, if the victims were students or teachers or others. Within the community itself, there's a lot of knowledge about who the alleged perpetrator was. We do not know if we're going to get any more information from police about that in the next hour. But again, piecing together how this could have happened. And again, as many viewers are aware, Canada does have very strict gun control laws, but in a community like that, I point out it is legal to have guns, to have them register as long as you're storing them properly. And teenagers can also use those firearms under proper supervision. So many questions still, Issa, not the least of which is those 25 people, some that had to be medevaced out, and what their condition is at this hour.
Yeah, and we have heard in the last few moments from Prime Minister Mark Carney. I think he was addressing the House of Commons, saying this morning families in Tumbler Ridge woke to a different world. And this just goes back to exactly the point that you were making, Paula. This is such a small community, right? A town of 2,400 people. I imagine someone will know someone, right, that has been affected by this. Give us just a sense of just the utter shock that's being felt right now, not just in this community, but right across Canada.
I think that is the issue, right? You said the shockwave immediately went right through the country from coast to coast to coast. And I know that in the intro we talked about how rare it is in Canada, but if you ask Canadians, gun violence is still far too common. And I have covered several in this country working for CNN. It is absolutely shattering for the entire country. And then we get to this small community, right, Isa? Even if you don't know anyone who was hurt or injured, you were at the daycare next door, you were working at the health clinic, your daughter was working at the health clinic, your husband was a first responder, and the panic of having a community shut down for nearly 4 hours, knowing that children were barricading themselves in the classrooms. The other thing I want to add here, Isa, and it is just unfortunately a fact of life, I know so many parents, teachers, students right now understanding that the students in that school knew what to do, the principal knew what to do, the teachers knew what to do, and that saved lives, that barricading in the classrooms and making sure that they understood this was serious and that it was an alert. A terrible reality that so many of us live in, but it is an important fact that preparation in these environments is key.
We're thinking of everyone, of course, in Tumbler Ridge. I know you'll stay across the story, of course, when we hear more from authorities. We'll come back to you, Paula Newton, for us in Ottawa, in Canada. Good to see you, Paula. Well, there may be a new demand in the search for missing woman Nancy Guthrie. Still to come tonight, the note sent to TMZ and what it's offering in exchange for Bitcoin. And then a surprise counter-drone laser attack in El Paso. How this brought an unprecedented airspace shutdown in Texas. We'll have a live report. That's just a little later.
Weekdays on CNN.
Tonight on 360.
The stories that matter.
This whole area is just engulfed in flames.
From a trusted voice.
We witnessed something nobody alive has ever seen before. You said that AI could wipe out half of all entry-level jobs. How soon might that happen?
A fearless eyewitness.
We just got a red alert to go down to a bomb shelter.
Every night makes sense of the world.
How do you make the case that USAID's previous mission was in the United States' national interest?
Anderson Cooper 360. Weekdays on CNN.
Here's a breakdown of what you can find out front. The real question comes down to, where is the supreme leader? Where are we when it comes to inflation? Direct, in-depth, and raw. Do you think that Pam Bondi is hiding something?
Hell yeah, I think she's hiding something.
Getting ahead of the biggest stories and giving you context you won't find anywhere else. We are in an unprecedented moment. Do you like capitalism?
No, I have many critiques of capitalism.
Aaron Burnett out front. Weekdays on CNN.
If you can keep your head when markets all around you are losing and you can't see a way through, if you can trade and not make money your master, meeting triumph and disaster in equal measure, if you can run with the bulls and not be afraid of the bears, for when we come together, we will make sense of it all. And what is more, my friend, you will be profitable. For you are indeed watching Quest Means Business.
Did the re-election of Donald Trump play any role in your decision to resign? Why do you need to study it? It sounds like you have the facts on your fingertips.
Great question.
You continue to fight for your name to be cleared. Why? Do you have any concerns about Elon Musk?
There really is much more that unites us as Americans than that which divides us.
A moment with huge consequences for the nation and the world.
Watch The Lead, weeknights on CNN.
Caitlin Collins is your DC source, bringing you unprecedented access to the White House.
We're live in the center of the political universe.
Capitol Hill.
My Democratic source tonight is Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren. If you don't get what you need from Congress, can you achieve what you're trying to achieve?
And beyond.
We're live on the ground in Israel tonight about the Gazans leaving. Where exactly are you suggesting that they should go?
Follow Caitlin for in-depth political coverage and analysis. And watch her on The Source, Tuesday through Saturday on CNN.
Well, TMZ says it's received a new note related to the kidnapping of Nancy Guthrie. However, this does not appear to be a ransom note. The site says the note demands 1 Bitcoin in exchange for the name of the person involved in her disappearance. CNN reached out to the FBI, but they had no comment. This comes after a man in Rio Rico, Arizona, south of Tucson, was detained for questioning but ultimately released. The search for Nancy Guthrie is now in its 11th day. She is the daughter of NBC Today show anchor Savannah Guthrie. Let's bring in our chief law enforcement and intelligence analyst, John Miller, who has been on this story since day one. So, John, let's just get your thoughts, first of all, about this new demand. What stands out to you? How do we know if this is legitimate here?
What stands out to me is that we don't know if it's legitimate. I mean, the whole concept of it, which is I'm going to come to you on an anonymous platform, then I'm going to suggest that you pay me $66,000 in one Bitcoin on a different anonymous platform, and then I'm going to provide you with the information, doesn't work. That's why when the FBI offered a $50,000 reward for the identity of the kidnappers leading to their arrest or the recovery of Nancy Guthrie, either one, they say you provide the information first and then we pay you. The we pay you and you provide the information model is never going to work, not at those rates.
And so if you're the FBI, you're getting that, you're not necessarily pushing that aside. You would then respond to that saying, you give me proof of life, right?
Right. So if that person says, I can tell you who the kidnappers are, then you engage in a dialogue, which is, I'm not going to send you tens of thousands of dollars, but let's talk. How do you have access to this information? What can you do to verify that your information is true? You go down that road a little bit, but certainly it's not going to be you pay the money and they tell you later, because A, they may have something that's completely inaccurate, and B, they may just take the money and you might never hear from them again. It's just not a model that works.
Yeah, it could be a total scam, right? Now, we heard the FBI chief, Kash Patel, say that, I think he said persons of interest are being investigated. Then we saw a man being detained, and then after hours of questioning, he was released. Two questions off the back of that. Do we know how many persons of interest there are, and why the authorities in particular zeroed in on this man?
So this was a lead that came into the FBI that was developed by the investigators prior to the release of the video. One of the things that I think drove this lead a little bit was when they considered the information they had on the individual and the fact that his build was similar to that of the person in the video, and more important than all of that, the fact that if there was a possibility that she was being held at that house, that they had to move very quickly. All of those things came together. But from the FBI standpoint, they are looking at a number of people. They are looking at a number of people who could be operating together and people who could be operating as individuals. But it is not uncommon in these cases for a suspect to emerge, to become very hot, and then you go through the process of getting them in, questioning them, and basically proving either they are the person or just as often proving they're not the person. And then you have to triage back down and move on to the next one. But that's the way that goes.
Day 11 here's hoping for some good news soon. John Miller, thank you very much indeed. Well, in a week filled with political drama, and we are only on Wednesday, I believe, we also have new details on the U.S. Justice Department's case against Democratic lawmakers. On Tuesday, a federal grand jury declined to indict the Democrats who posted a video urging service members to disobey any illegal orders. This rare rejection from a grand jury rebukes the Trump administration's efforts to paint the lawmakers as dangerously undermining the president's authority. And still to come tonight, the airspace over El Paso in Texas has reopened just hours after it was announced it would be closed for the next 10 days. We'll explain what the confusion is all about. And it was, well, kind of awkward, the story of the Olympic medal winner who turned his press conference into a very personal confession booth. That is next.
Tokyo takes pride in keeping its city clean. But why? Edo spirit is what keeps Tokyo clean.
This is the Redwood Forest in California, home to some of the tallest and oldest trees in the world. Since 1918, more than 225,000 acres of these forests have been protected through the work of conservation groups, foundations, and the local community. Believing in a better future, be part of the movement. Find out more on cnn.com/call to earth, in partnership with Rolex and its Perpetual Planet Initiative.
We've shared the stories of Africa's brightest stars, and now we're opening up the conversation, raw, real, and revealing. This is African Voices.
This week, Chef Marcus Samuelsson.
You have become one of the most
visible ambassadors for Black and African cooking.
I can't just sit on the sideline and hope somebody else is going to do that.
African Voices on CNN. In association with Glow.
How do we connect you with stories from around the globe? We examine big ideas and all the details. Join me for Connect the World with Becky Anderson.
Weekdays on CNN.
When you travel the world, make sure the world travels with you. Check in, log on, get connected with all of the latest developments at your fingertips. CNN Partner Hotels, connected to your world.
Innovations for the future. Business trends of the present. Distinctive traditions of the past. Meet the power players in Asia's emerging and established markets.
Who will stand out from the competition?
What will attract new industry consumers?
Where will productivity hit a new level?
And how will it impact the global economy? Join me, Christy Lustell.
And me, Hanneke Montgomery, on Marketplace Asia.
This weekend on CNN.
I'm Rafael Romo in Atlanta. This is CNN.
Well, turning now to an unprecedented airspace shutdown in Texas lifted just hours ago. According to sources, a sweeping flight ban was triggered by a surprise Pentagon plan using counter-drone lasers. It was staged with no coordination with the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA. The Trump White House claims Mexican cartel drones crossing into U.S. airspace led to flights being grounded. But multiple sources have said the Pentagon's counter-drone activity raised concern for civilian traffic at El Paso International Airport. And this comes after the FAA announced a 10-day airspace shutdown late on Tuesday, pointing to, quote, special security reasons. Reacting to the incident, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum says Mexico had no information on drone activity at the border. Let's get more on this. Pete Martin joins me now live from Washington. So, Pete, I know this is your reporting. Just what more do we know about this counter-drone laser and why the Pentagon wouldn't communicate with the FAA here?
It seems that the federal government really bungled the coordination when it came to this high-powered anti-drone laser being used at the U.S.-Mexican border by the Pentagon. There was a meeting, multiple sources tell CNN, planned for February 20th between Pentagon and Federal Aviation Administration officials to sort out how this could potentially cause a risk to civilian flights. But the Pentagon went ahead, according to these sources, with the use of this laser system, causing the Federal Aviation Administration to put into place this 10-day airspace ban on all flights. We're talking not only airlines and private flights, but also medevac flights, law enforcement. That, in and of itself, was very unprecedented over a city of about 700,000 people.
Pete, I'm sorry to interrupt. The police in Canada holding a presser. Let's listen in.
Threats remained. Those with potential injuries were transported to the local medical clinic for triage and assessment, and 2 victims with significant injuries were transported to hospital via air ambulance. Following a medical assessment of the individuals, no discernible physical injuries were identified for those that remained at scene. I'd like to correct some information that was shared yesterday and to clarify that 9 people in total are deceased as a result of this incident. Initially, it was believed that one of the victims, a female with significant injuries, who was transported from the scene by our members and then transitioned to paramedics, had succumbed to her injuries. Police have since confirmed that is not the case. She is alive and was one of the 2 female victims that were airlifted to hospital. Both of those victims remain in serious condition. The deceased victims from the school include an adult female educator, 3 female students, and 2 male students between the ages of 13 and 17. 2 additional victims, an adult female and a male youth, were located deceased in the local residence. The BC Major Crime Unit has assumed conduct of the investigation and is working to determine the full circumstances surrounding this tragic incident. There's been much speculation within the community regarding the relationship between the shooter and some of the victims. All of that remains part of the active and ongoing investigation. We are not in a position to publicly confirm any specifics at this time. Additional resources have been deployed to Tumbler Ridge to support both the investigation and day-to-day policing operations, which continue with the assistance of our neighboring detachments. BC Emergency Health Services, the Tumbler Ridge Fire Department, the local medical center, the school district, the community center, and many others within the community have provided significant support throughout this response. Anyone in the community who does not need support, who does need support, is asked to go to the Tumbler Ridge Community Center at 340 Front Street. We understand the community has questions, and we understand they want to know the motive behind this tragic incident. We do believe the suspect acted alone, and there are currently no other outstanding suspects. Our investigators remain on scene, actively gathering information to determine the full circumstances of what transpired. This is a deeply distressing incident where 9 individuals have senselessly lost their lives. Our thoughts are with the families, the loved ones, the first responders in the greater Tumbler Ridge community, and all those impacted by this tragic incident. If you have questions, I'm prepared to take them at this time.
Officer Romina Dea from Global News, could you please expand a little bit on the suspect? Was he known to police? Were there any red flags regarding his mental health?
So a suspect is identified as an 18-year-old female by the name of Jessie. We have a history of police attendance at the family residence. Some of those calls were related to mental health issues.
Could you spell the suspect's name, please?
Yes. The first name is spelled Jesse. The surname is spelled capital VAN, then space, capital ROOTSELAAR.
Were the 2 victims found at the residence where the suspect lived?
Yes.
And why can't you elaborate on the relationship between the victims and in that residence and...
I can't elaborate on that. So it is believed the victims of that residence and the suspect are family members.
Can you say what parents, sibling, what relationship that is?
Yes, the female adult victim is the mother of the suspect, and the youth male is the brother of the suspect, or stepbrother.
Can you expand? You talked about the history of mental health with this female suspect. Could you expand on that?
I'll give you perhaps remaining some general comments on that. Police had attended that residence on multiple occasions over the past several years, dealing with concerns of mental health with respect to our suspect. I can say that on different occasions the suspect was apprehended for assessment and follow-up.
So apprehended under the Mental Health Act?
Yes.
Taken to hospital?
In some circumstances, yes.
Any indication whether or not the suspect was receiving any help for their mental health situation regarding counseling, any of those services that are involved?
I don't have that information at this time. If the suspect was currently receiving care, I don't have that information at this time.
Any of the interactions with police, did any of them have to do with weapons?
Yes.
In particular?
Yes.
Could you expand on that, please?
I will say that, again, I'm not trying to be too circumspect, but police have attended that residence in the past, approximately a couple of years ago, where firearms were seized under the criminal code. I can say that at a later point in time, the lawful owner of those firearms petitioned for those firearms to be returned, and they were.
Were criminal charges laid in relation to those firearms?
No.
What firearm with FYI media? My question is, we've heard all around the world reports coming up from different media, not local but world, and we've heard people from Tumbler Ridge, actually people that know the shooter,
and they are all saying that this person is transgender. Why is the RCMP not speaking to this? Why are we hiding this from the public?
Well, first off, thank you for your question. We're not hiding it. In fact, you're the first media to ask the question. I will say this. We identified the suspect as they chose to be identified in public and in social media. I can say that Jesse was born as a biological male who approximately, the information that I have, approximately 6 years ago began to transition to female and identified as female both socially and publicly.
Unfortunately, we've heard a lot of transgender and mass school shootings. Do you think there's a correlation here?
It's too early to say whether that has any correlation in this investigation. I think it's important to recognize that this investigation is still in its infancy. We have scenes still lock down the school and the residents while we execute search warrants and gather further evidence and talk to witnesses that may have further evidence for police.
I'm just wondering, can you tell me when were police, prior to yesterday, last in contact with Jesse?
That's a good question. I probably have that answer somewhere here in my papers, but I believe we were there sometime last year.
So nothing in the last few days?
Nothing in the last few days, that's correct.
Okay, and you talked about the guns that were recovered. And can you say anything about who owned those guns, whether he had any sort of...
So I will say this. I know the guns are of significant interest to everybody. Part of the reason we haven't identified the specific models of the firearms or ownership is because at this point in time our investigators continue to pursue those leads. We want to make sure that the information we do provide is accurate. We want to ensure that we can identify properly the ownership of the firearms, how they were procured, whether they were lawfully owned, unlawfully owned, whether they were manufactured, and whether there could be any other parties to an offense that we are not yet aware of. So when we are able to release that information, we certainly will.
He was quite young. Did he have a license?
I can say that she had a license that had expired. I believe it was in 2024. She did not have any firearms registered to her.
Can you talk about, sir, any indication in the information you have regarding Jesse experiencing bullying at the school, any sort of difficulty at the school because of this transition from male to female?
I do not have any information to suggest that was the case. I can say that Jesse dropped out of school approximately 4 years ago and was not currently attending the school.
Sir, I have a question here from Jared, the Western Standard. They wanted to just know why we waited until now to confirm the identity of the suspect.
It's a good question. I know it's one of concern, specifically with the speed of social media. I think it's important to recognize that yesterday, when we first provided a media availability, it was approximately 5 hours after the active shooter event. At that point in time, we were still trying to lock down locations. We had victims that we were evacuating. As you can imagine, the scene was quite chaotic with significant amount of trauma. And it's important for us, when we do release information, to get it accurate. I point to the case of now having to correct and say that there's only 9 deceased persons instead of 10. We want to get information out as quick as possible, but we also appreciate that that information needs to be accurate, because particularly when we're dealing with victims or are dealing with the identity of a suspect, we have to take into consideration, in this case, our suspect was deceased. We had to locate next of kin to notify them. So I would hate, notwithstanding the public interest, I would hate for someone to find out that their loved one was deceased coming from our podium or coming from the news media in advance of being told in person.
And then I have one other question here from Ruth with Energetic C. Was the suspect related to any school?
I can say that the suspect was not related to any of the victims of the school. I don't have any broader information beyond that, other than say that the suspect was related to the 2 victims at the private residence.
Did the suspect leave a note or any other...
You have been listening there to the Canadian police giving us more details, of course, about what happened in that shooting. Just horrific. We've got more details. I'm going to give you a sense of what we have heard from the Canadian Police now identifying the shooter, 18-year-old female, goes by the name Jessie Rotzeller, born as a biological male, and then 6 years ago, a transition to female, identified as female, had a history, from what we heard from police, history of police attendance at the family residence that was related to mental health. There was firearms involved, firearms seized at the residence, then they were returned. In terms of the people deceased, 9 people have been deceased following the shooting at Tumbler Ridge. We know that it was an adult female educator, 3 female students and 2 male, 1 13, 1 17. And then we had 2 additional victims. This is in a home, not in the school, that were deceased. One's an adult female, one is a male. And I believe, from what I heard, one's the stepmother and the other is the mother. Let's get more from Paula Newton, who is listening to that press conference. Paula, what stood out to you?
A few things here. I mean, look, thankfully, the victim that was transported to hospital that police had indicated might have passed away is alive and in serious condition, firstly. Secondly, a lot of things that stand out here, and that is the fact that this was certainly not just the suspect herself, but the entire family was known to police, clearly coping with a lot in that family, including the fact that there were at one time registered firearms in that home, that those firearms were taken away. Now, they can be taken away because they weren't stored properly or because they weren't being used properly. Again, there are strict gun laws in Canada. What happened here, though, is that the adult in that home, it seemed, appealed to have the guns returned to them, and they were returned, and there were guns in that household. Again, I point out that Jessie was only 18. She could have, at the age of 18, applied for a firearms license, but as a teenager, you get what they call a minor license, and an adult is responsible for for making sure that you have the firearm, how you use it, when you use it, and is responsible for storage. A lot of questions there, but also, obviously, Isa, the fact that police were very blunt, that they had been to this residence several times in relation to what they describe as mental health issues, and that the suspect here had not attended school for 4 years. I mean, basically had not attended high school. We can't know why, but of course, police saying that it had to do with mental health reasons in terms of why they appeared at the residence. Again, such a tragedy, Isa. Still so many questions, and police are saying they're just at the beginning of this investigation.
I know you'll be across it for us, Paula. Thank you very much indeed. We are going to take a short break. We'll be back after this.
Stablecoins are a financial instrument that sits on a blockchain and is backed by something like a fiat currency, like a dollar. We're sitting here in the UAE, and the center of gravity doesn't have to be London or Frankfurt or Paris. We have a very thriving crypto and blockchain ecosystem growing up in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi. So one of the things I like about it is the world is way bigger than just a few old cities in the US and Europe. And crypto reflects that. Crypto is truly international. It's kind of borderless. The blockchain and the internet, they don't, there is government control or surveillance, but they're truly borderless in many ways. And you can connect. You could be playing a video game online, and the person you're playing with doesn't have to be here in Dubai. They could be in South Korea. Distance disappears on the internet, and blockchain does the same for money.
In a divided America,
where do I fit? You tell me, ask your party.
Abby Phillip brings all sides to the table.
Can you name one thing you do different? The hypocrisy is so rank, folks at home. Classes in session.
To talk about the issues.
Congresswoman, it is false. The answer is 0.
The policies.
What is the Democratic Party about? Can you answer that question?
And the biggest debates to wrap up your day.
I hear what you're saying Trump believes in, but do you think it's a good idea?
News Night with Abby Phillip, Tuesday through Saturday on CNN.
I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Happiness could lead to living longer. You want to know how? On my podcast, Chasing Life, I'm uncovering the secrets of people around the world who are living happy, healthy, extraordinary lives. Hear how they do it and the science behind why it works. Join me as I reveal their secrets and discover how we can chase life together. Listen to Chasing Life with me, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, wherever you get your podcasts.
Every day we take a step back to look at the big picture, from decisions made in Washington to the ripple effects across Asia, Europe, and beyond. We follow the story as it unfolds and hear every voice to make sure the information is clear, fair, and relevant to you. In a world packed with noise, facts matter. That's what we do here. This is The Brief.
And this just into CNN, the American actor James has died at the age of 48. His wife, Kimberly, shared the news on her Instagram, saying he passed peacefully and that he, quote, met his final days with courage, faith, as well as grace. She went on to say, quote, for now we ask for peaceful privacy as we grieve our loving husband, father, son, brother, and friend. Van der Beek revealed he was battling stage 3 bowel cancer, in 2024. And he rose to fame, as many of us remember, in the 1990s, known for playing Dawson Leary in the hit TV series Dawson's Creek. That does it for us for tonight. Max Foster is up next with What We Know.